So we did a Professional Scrum Master Advanced course earlier on this week, and it went really, really well. Well, I thought it went really well. So
I like that as a good opener. I mean, well, judging, we got an instant 5-star Trustpilot, right? So that helps a little bit with that feedback.
It does. Yeah, that inner critic in me just immediately jumps out there. Yeah. One of the things that we did, we was asked the attendees to, share some of the most difficult questions that they've been asked as a Scrum Master. And one question stood out a little bit, and it was like, why do we have to break items into smaller items of deliverable value? When it's done, it's done.
It's quite funny. The coach in me just goes, why wouldn't you? It's just like, well, what happens when you don't? I mean, that's a great first question. You look at complex products, how, if Apple had just said, we want to build a phone and we don't care, it's not like we don't care, but it's like, we're just going to put the project plan around the whole phone rather than the components of the phone. Does that make sense? I guess maybe there's a subtlety in this. At what level does it make sense to break things down? And who wants the information, or who needs the information once it is broken down?
To keep the analogy, if for the end customer.
Oh no, it's going to to be a terrible analogy.
I was keeping the example of Apple phone or a phone. To the customer.
Other phones are available.
Yeah. To the end customer, they just want their phone. So exactly. It kind of makes sense that, why do we have to break it down as small? They're only going to start using it when it's all there. So why should we break stuff down? Can we not just have a big item saying phone?
So there's something interesting in there. It's like the releasable value part, right? At what part does whatever you're building become releasable? Because I wish I hadn't said it, but I worked for Nokia, and so there's a little bit of insight in there, but it's a relatable insight when, as a customer, right? So let's go from that perspective as a customer, as a stakeholder, as a shareholder. I'm thinking like even shareholders, right? And maybe board of directors disconnected, perhaps. They see the phone, they see the car, they see the speaker. I'm looking around my desk. They see the camera and whatever else, right? They don't see the let's go on a camera. They don't see the autofocus or the reversing sensors or the whatever. No. The cooling, the music, the thing. They don't see those as releasable value. And actually, you probably couldn't, right? Unless you resell. You're reselling multiple platforms. So at that level, if you're only thinking at that level, it doesn't make much sense. However, it's far harder to forecast. So when you're looking to judge, when am I going to get my stuff? It's potentially far harder to forecast when you're only looking at the big picture in a highly complicated and complex product.
Yeah. And we say this quite a lot on the courses that nobody really cares how you deliver. They just want their stuff. You could use Scrum, you could use Kanban, you could use Andiban or whatever we've just invented there, but they just want their stuff and they want to know when they're going to have it. So if you've got a huge item coming through your backlog and it's like, well, when are we going to get that? When are we going to get that phone? And then I suppose it's up to the teams to say, okay, how can we deliver this?
So when we go, so let's skip all the other layers in an organization and go down to a doing the work level, right?
Yeah.
There's an is it non-translated, non-talked about? Brilliant words. Factor of risk avoidance, risk aversion, maybe, in terms of when you are decomposing work. At what point for you as a producer, builder, developer from a Scrum perspective, at what point does it become valuable and useful for you to decompose? So you are de-risking the ability to deliver. So how complex or complicated do you want to make your life? Can you decompose this work into a component that does hold value and is small, can be fitted into a sprint or less, or your SLE if you're doing Kanban. Um, what makes sense at that level, and then you get into the kind of like the arguments around, well, we couldn't possibly decompose this work, right? We couldn't possibly break this down. And, those kind of arguments, they have some weight, right? So yes, I can see where you're coming from, but also we need to be able to have a conversation about, well, that thing that is so complicated that you can't break down, what's the risk that you're holding on to there, that it won't get done? So how can we help you get that work done, or complete, or whatever you're, classing stuff as. So there's some interesting dynamics going on at that level when you start to kind of say, well, look, we need to understand forecasting and our progress, and that's often the main driver for decomposition. But I think there's the factor that isn't talked about, which is that kind of risk factor of, if we decompose this work, is it going to be slightly less risky in terms of change or delivery or complexity, or there's a complicationality. It's not a word, but that was the word that was going through my through my brain.
I suppose as well, if you do break it down into smaller, still valuable bits, it's not just on one person to deliver that work. It makes it easier to share the load across other people as well. As they have specialist skills. You'll be able to bring those other people in and work on it at the same time, or at least move it forward. Because if you were just to have one big piece of work, and it happens to be the Andy piece of work, it's, well, as me, I'd be thinking, well, what can I do to get in there? How can I help Andy? What can I do to support him? And,
And there's also the factor of, if you don't break that thing down, from a developer point of view, how do you know you're building the right thing? How can you test along the way that actually the vision that the stakeholders, shareholders, customers, consumers share potentially, in different guises? How do you know you're building the right thing? How do you know? Because you could run off into the hills, carving out a phone shaped wooden block, right? And but that's not going to be what people want. And so the decomposition is important at various levels and from various viewpoints. I don't think there is one answer that gives the kind of the ultimate value here.
I may have just jumped ahead in my head a little bit, because I was thinking, if you know exactly what you're after, and you've done it before, then maybe breaking it down isn't important, because you just do the work. So we've got a big piece of work, just work your way through it. Is it the fact that actually you've got uncertainty and uncomplexity? No, uncertainty and complexity in the thing, and also we're not 100% sure what it is we want, and it's only by breaking it down we can then say to people, is that what you're after for this area? So we're getting that feedback loop.
So I think what you're talking about is different perspectives on the type of work or type of challenge that people have to do, right? So even through, I'm just thinking, digging a hole in a garden, right? It's quite a sensible, I'm digging a post hole, right? I had to redo all my fence, this. Yeah. Absolute hell, right? Should have been bloody easy, but every time I dug into the ground, I found an old concrete base of an old post hole that somebody had over-engineered because they obviously had too much concrete. So even when we think we know, I don't believe we are ever 100% sure of something. No. But I'm sure there are people out there who argue it, and I don't have any scientific data to back that up. But my perspective on life, that's how it works.
That's totally true. My dad was a plumber, and there was a trapsies hour and there was a normal hour. And you'd start doing a job and it'd be like, oh, that takes about an hour or so. And you'd start having a look at something, and the next thing you know, it's like, oh, the joists are all rotten, or we're going to have to replace that, or there's something wrong with it. So
I told you about
I suppose that's going down a different route.
No, but I
Pardon?
told you about Ness's car about like replacing the headlight this week. You know,
Yes, you
it's
did.
like, what is wrong with the auto industry where you have to take the wheel off, the inner wheel arch, jack the thing up, and yet you still can't get to the back of the headlight properly. I mean, you know, but it's that, you know,
So is
it
that
should
over
be.
engineered?
Oh, well, it's lack of foresight. You know, I think that's a problem of we're spiraling out, but you know, potentially
Yeah.
a problem of disconnection between design. You know, they want a
Mm.
funky looking and lovely, sleek looking front of it's an old Audi. It's not a posh one. But they want a nice sleek front. Yet the engineering around safety and, you know, the crash zones and all that kind of stuff probably get in the
Yeah.
way, you know, and who gets to pay the cost ultimately? Well, the user then ends up taking it back to the dealership, you know,
Yeah.
so the dealership wins. You know, but you know, anyway, we're spiraling into kind of like, you know, user
Poor
cost
design,
models
really.
and, you know, and
Yeah.
yeah, poor design, those kind of things.
So breaking stuff down again. Why do we talk about making things simpler? Why do we break things down? And what's the benefit of that, really? I mean, there's nothing stopping us, surely, from just
Well, I
keeping it
think
at a high level. You know, like if you're following the breaking down of an epic into a theme, all complementary practices into a feature, and then whatever. Why not just work at the epic and just
well, so I
be
think
working on it?
I think there's you know, are you a couple of tests, right? Are you working on your own, and does it matter? You know, so it's kind of like if you're working on your own and time and cost and, you know, whatever else doesn't matter, then realistically you can break it down or not. You know, again, my brain's going back to the post hole digging, right? You know, after one, I knew that every time I went to dig a new post hole, I'd carry my SDS drill, I'd have the electric sort, you know, so
Yeah.
the fact actually I'd learned through, you know, doing, you know, so the empirical way, and then broken down in my brain, you know, the kind of like the tacit knowledge steps in my brain about what I was going to do next was
Yeah.
very helpful for me, because it meant, okay, I've got to go and dig another hole means I need X equipment, and, you know, we're going to do it. And
Now,
sharing that throughout the team, when you kind of get more than one person, you know, again, it can be beneficial or it can't. So could you add complexity just to that process? And I would argue yes, just by adding another person to it, you know, breaking it down, because two people can't dig the hole at the same time.
one of the things that I talk about is the fact that if you break it down, it makes it more transparent, and you can see potential issues. You could see potential
I think
faults.
that really is the lesson.
And other
You know?
people can see progress as well.
Yeah.
Because I was going to say, could your family see the progress of you digging these holes? But
so there's an interesting psychological factor to add to this, which is the perception factor of what you believe. So that, you know, it fits into this idea of mental models, is what you see around you when it comes to task work. So it's your mental model of the world around you. So when developers are approaching, you know, developers from a Scrum point of view, or, you know, people are approaching task work, their mental model of what they're seeing the world around them and the kind of the impact and what they have to do for the work, even though the work could be the same, your perception and perspective could be different. And this is when you get problems with task sharing. This is why in high critical environments, you have task lists written down, and that confirmation check. So airline pilots are great for this. You know, it's exiting runway 359. You know, signals on my left. You know, check, and, you know, co-pilots. Yep, exiting runway. So you have that you have that kind of order confirmation check in, you know, in those safety critical systems, you know, so, and we don't, I'm not saying we should do it, but understanding the psychological impact of decomposition is just as important as the idea of decomposing work. So that shared idea about, if we are decomposing this, we all understand that decomposition and what that means and how to execute on it.
Yeah. Because I was just thinking, like, using the airplane analogy, the fact that you could have an item just like take plane off, plane takeoff. That's the kind of thing. So, and as a pilot, that's the thing. Yeah. But actually, underneath there is so much more things they need to check.
Air traffic control. Yeah. So the only reason I know this stuff, and it's kind of like, I spent last year my postgrad doing pretty much safety systems psychology, and looking at crash incidents for airlines, and the kind of like the what happens when there's fog, what happens when the aircraft control tower doesn't understand garbled messaging language, internal comms within the cockpit. I mean, you could draw a lot of analogies to how software development teams function or don't function in terms of communication and miscommunication. Certainly, it's a massively interesting aspect when even simple changes come through to what you are actually impacting is a complex code-based system, and all of these changes flying in all the time, and the level of communication has to be actually far better than people would assume.
Yeah. Because I coming back to the questions, why do we break it down? Surely it's done when it's done as well. I mean, I have worked with people like subject matter experts that have been in the teams that have said, there's only me that can do that. I know what I need to do. I'm just going to start the item. I'm just going to work on it. There's nobody else can help me. And there's pushback when we've suggested and said, look, can you break it down a little bit more? Well, no, why? Well, because it enables us to see progress. Yeah, but I know what's going on. So, and, it's one of those things where I think is that they have an idea of what needs to happen in the work, but they're not 100% sure. And maybe it's a thing where actually, if we ask them to break it down, it's showing not a weakness, but uncertainty. And there's a little bit of reluctance in showing that uncertainty with their peers, such that they then go, actually, I'm just going to work on this, and it's done when it's done. And it's a big item. But then when we say, hey, look, can you break this down? It makes them feel a little bit vulnerable. And it's like, well, actually, I'm giving away a bit of my knowledge, or I'm actually not sure 100% what it is.
I think
there's still worth in doing it. It's still worth in breaking that down for other people to learn, other people to spot gaps, misassumptions, and all those kinds of things. What do you think of that?
I think I'd agree. I'd agree with the not knowing part. Yeah. The other factor I would add in there is probably feels wasteful to spend time decomposing that work, because you don't know what needs to get done. So I'm thinking of my downstairs toilet, which I ripped apart when we moved in because it was leaking and horrible and stinky and goodness, and I haven't yet. It's just such a tedious job. I haven't yet opened the door. I have several times and then looked in and gone, man, I'm not touching that. But at some point, I am going to have to touch it in the next month. It's going to have to happen. And I know in my mind, I've got kind of like a vision of what needs to get done in that room. But for me to break it down is wasteful. It's far easier for me just to get on with it and figure it out and discover as I go. Could two people work in that space at the same time? No. My dad genuinely is offered to help, and I'm like, that's really cool, but like one person can fit. It's an understairs toilet. I mean, you can't have, it's not like a massive bathroom. You can't have two people in there at the same time. And I think there are types of work within software development where, you're stuck in a downstairs toilet under some stairs. The work is hard and complex, and actually, it's not about being selfish, and it's not about that person not wanting to share. It's just because the work is so grubby and horrible, and it's a bit, I don't know what to do with this. Sharing that is it feels more wasteful to that person than just cracking on and getting the work done. But I can see the opposite side. Yeah.
Yeah. There is value in you talking to your family and saying, look, this is the steps I'm going to be taking. It's rubber ducking. It's a rubber ducking when you bounce the ideas off people and you say, look, I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to have to possibly level the floor to get the toilet level. Or why are you doing that? Maybe you could use a compound just to get it level. Or actually there's a self-leveling toilet or whatever. But actually just breaking the things... I think there might be. I don't know. A self-leveling toilet.
Sorry, yeah.
Anyway, but if there isn't, we've just invented it for that very niche moment. But the steps of you breaking it down and actually walking it through with somebody and going, this is what I'm going to have to do. There's a new, system got to go on, or actually that old system's got to come off first. And that means we've got to tap off the water. Or actually there's lead piping in there, which I didn't realize about as well. So that needs to come out. All that actually, am I now then going to use copper piping, or am I using plastic piping? And is it push foot, push fit, and all that kind of brilliant conversations.
Push foot and self-leveling toilets is what I've got out of
this. I know. This is why I didn't really help my dad out very often as a plumber's mate. But I used to carry the bags. I used to do all this stuff, and he was the brains, and I'd say, right, what do you need?
I think I don't know how much more time we want to spend on it, but I think there is a, how can I put this? Give the person a chance. Give them they need a give me a chance token from Scrum Masters or Scrum teams to go, I don't know how to decompose that work now. Right. Yeah. I need to get in there. I need to have a good look around. Right. Once I've got a good look around, actually I'm going to have a better idea of how to decompose this. And yes, when I've got that, then I'll probably get a list of all the things I need to go and get done.
So would you say, and I'm not wanting to put words in your mouth, that we can have a large item, but then through exploration, inspection, adaptation, we can then add items into the sprint backlog that support that work. Either we're breaking it down more, or we're putting it into the product backlog and working through it. And it's through the art of actually just going and actually doing the work and making that visible to everybody else. That's why we break it down.
Yes, I think I understand what you said, but I think there's a so Scrum introduced this concept of refinement, which lots of people see as should be an event. Some people think is wasteful, actually getting work done. I have changed my perspective over the years on refinement, where to the point where I think it can be useful, but I don't think it should be an official event. I'm glad they took the 10% out. And actually, I would rather see teams acting in a getting on with work. So pulling work in, using Scrum for what it was my belief of what it was intended to do, which is that tactical, we don't know. So the bit, kind of trying to articulate me walking into the downstairs. Am I going to go down there today? Right. I'm going to walk in there. I am going to go, okay, let me clear all the stuff I've thrown in there out. Let me have a good look around. Then I can create some kind of idea in my brain about how to go and tackle this. Right. And then I might start to break it down. Yeah. It's a valuable job. So why would we go and prioritize other things like all the other jobs I've done instead of doing that?
Like the fence.
The fence needed doing, but but when we look at it from a team point of view, if it really is the highest priority thing, we're almost falling into waterfall patterns by saying we're going to spend a lot of time trying to understand what it is before we go and tackle it. Why don't we just go and tackle it? And figure out whether and how complicated this thing is, because either way we're going to understand that. We can either spend a load of time not doing anything and thinking about it, or we can think about it a little bit and then go and action it. And so and this is my thorough perception of where Scrum was intended to come from, was that getting on with complex work that needed decomposition. But you didn't spend a sprint ahead decomposing that work. You decompose that work when that work hit the team. We look at it from a Kanban point of view. When you pull that work into the system, that's when you decompose the work. That's when you're going to get a better understanding. That's when I think, well, okay, the first step, and this is the one I know I need to do, is I need to take all of those pipes that are running into the house, all the heating. I need to put a fresh supply in. I need to move all the heating and the hot water supplies. It's a jumble. It's a rat's nest. I know that's the first job I need to do. From a team perspective, cool, that's the first thing we need to go and tackle on the team. It may be we need to decompose that even further. That's a whole different topic. But that's my belief of what Scrum should be trying to tackle in teams, not a pseudo project management framework of big design up front. Oh, we're going to sprint it out. It's not what it should be there for.
No. Well, I didn't think we go all around your house trying to answer this question, but with the toilets and everything. So in the Flex post. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Don't get me started on the roof.
Yeah. Don't get me started on the roof.
But if you have enjoyed listening to Andy and myself talk, please let us know in the comments. If there's some questions that you'd like us to go through, again, please let us know in the comments and we'd love to answer them. So thank you for spending 25 minutes or 20 minutes with us, however long you've spent with us. Thank you for that. And we shall see you soon.
Thank you.